Is our eyes sitting back like this? Too casual, too... The first time I auditioned, I remember walking underneath all these pipes that you've seen, you know, in sketches whenever they do backstage things. I go, oh, this is really surreal. Like, I was here once before with my Uncle George when he played Norm on Cheers, and he hosted the finale of 1991. And so I got to come watch that show. And so this was the second time I got to be, you know, in this space. And here it was, you know, 12 years later, a dozen years later. And then turn, and then there's the stage, and the brass are sitting there at a table, and you're just doing it, but to no laughs. And you're like, ah, right, okay. I guess it was like August 2003. I was doing a Second City show in Las Vegas at the Flamingo. We were performing for no one. We were doing shows for like 8 people. I remember Jeff Richmond, Tina Fey's husband, who did music here for many moons. I remember him saying to me, he's like, would you ever want to audition for Saturday Night Live? And I was like, I don't know. Why? No. Why? You know, and the way I've always said is, it's like the prettiest girl at school, you know, you're like, oh, I hate her. And then you're like, oh, that's too bad. She has a crush on you. Really? The first time I auditioned was at Stand Up New York. It was 12 guys, a guy named Rob Riggle.
Rob Riggle.
J.B. Smooth. Finesse Mitchell.
And SNL sold me out.
Keenan, who got hired at that time.
Yeah, my name is Keenan Thompson. How y'all doing?
But then I get up to go do my thing, and right before I go up, Chris Rock and Jeff Ross, you know, the Roastmaster General, come walking in, and then the guy hosting the thing was like, oh, we got a special surprise for you. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for Chris Rock. And Chris looks at me, he goes, was this your big shot, man? I go, yeah, kinda. He goes, sorry. And then he goes out there to, like, you know, the place goes nuts. Then the guy on stage is like, ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together, next comic, Jason Sudeikis. And, you know, I go up there, I said, it's actually pronounced Sudeikis, not that anybody cares, but all right, here we go. It went well, it felt like it went well. Got done with that, and then we got a call the next day saying, hey, they're gonna ask you to test, and then did the same thing at home base here. I mean, it was, you know, surreal.
Right.
Jason Sudeikis. Yeah, Jason Sudeikis. And then got on a flight, went home, found out a week later they want to fly you back to meet Lauren. I sit down, he sits next to me and goes, so what era of the show did you grow up with? And I just blanked, and I said, I really loved Eddie Murphy. Now, sure, I picked the one famous dude that guy didn't hire. And he gets the sense that I'm not a fan of the show. And he has this great line where he just goes, oh, don't worry, I didn't watch the show when I didn't work on it either. And that was like one of the first times that dude bailed me out of my own. Later that night, we got a call from Steve Higgins saying, hey, we're gonna hire you as a writer. I'm like, blew it. I was confused because I had just figured out how to write for myself. I had imposter syndrome, and Tina she was a hero of mine at Second City. She was like, you know, if you can improvise, you can write. And then her other piece of advice was like, don't write anything for someone in the cast that you could do yourself. Now, at this point, she was on Update, so she had walked that path herself. It was a learning process of how to develop my voice, but have it come out through other people. And I got lucky. I had 2 sketches on my first 2 weeks, one with Jack Black, and then the second week was Justin Timberlake, the first time he hosted. I wrote this sketch. It was a parody of Punk.
I know I am a master Kutcher. I'm awesome.
And Timberlake just crushed. And so I was like 2 for 2. Then week 3, I think I got to write with Robert Smigel and write a thing for my Uncle George to play the super fans.
Come on, babe, why don't we paint the town?
But it was like kind of like I got landed and dropped it and just off to the races.
Hi, I'm a big fan of your new sitcom, Hope and Faith.
Oh, wow, thank you.
Yeah, no, I was just kidding.
And then I went like 10 weeks with Jack. But I loved the rewrite table. The rewrite table was the best. It was like joking around with friends, and you get to, you know, mumble like a joke pitch under my mouth, and Tina would be like, what was that? That's great. Okay, we're going with that. And you're like, all right, oh, I'll be darned. And again, the imposter syndrome was so prevalent, it only helped fill the thing up to be like, you belong here. And yet at the same time, when I'd have those lows, I'd be like, why did I stop performing? Why did I stop performing? So after the first year and everything went decent, then the summer was off, and then come back, and I auditioned again.
George W. Bush doing an abbreviated stump speech in Wisconsin. It's nice to be around some cheeseheads that aren't in Washington.
Don't get it. Then I was asked to test for Weekend Update.
I'm Jason Sudeikis.
I'm Tina Fey, and here are tonight's top stories.
And that was fun. Amy got it, Amy Poehler, again, no complaints. And so then it was just right back into the writing thing. And I'd get asked to play, you know, like someone in the monologue or like a cop in the background. But at some point, I remember there were like 5 shows left my second season. I asked Lauren if I could talk to him on Friday night. And you always want to hit him after dinner because people have drinks at dinner. I say, Lauren, this has been an amazing experience, but I had to give up 2 things that I love the most, and that was living with my wife and performing. And he just looks at me, he's pouring water. He's just like, what if you had to choose one? You know, and I was like, and I just started laughing. And he goes, no, I understand. And we just sort of left it there. And it was by no means me throwing down the gauntlet like, hey, you put me in the cast or I take my bad sketches and I go elsewhere. Now, that week also happened to coincide with Tom Brady hosting. John Lutz, Rich Tellerico, and Joe Kelly, we all wrote this behind the music for the Super Bowl Shuffle for the '85 Bears. And in that sketch, we were playing all the white dudes on the Bears. Tom Brady played Jim McMahon. So the premise was that Jim McMahon, they did the Super Bowl Shuffle, it was a huge success. Then he tried to do another one, then he went solo. And when he went solo, I would just dance behind him. And that same week, Beck was the musical guest. He, for some reason, had a guy, like a hype man next to him, and was just dancing buck wild, just going crazy. So then I was like, oh, I'll just do my version of that, which is like doing all this 90s hip hop dance that I knew how to do from being like one of the few white kids on a predominantly black basketball team in my high school basketball days. That sketch was in rehearsal. So you had 20 dudes that were on stage who are now off stage, who are now watching me do this. And I remember them all laughing. I remember Lauren walking in, but it kind of became like a spotlight thing. It's something a cast member should be doing, which I totally agree with. And so then Friday night meeting, and they're talking about recasting that part. And Tina's like, well, who's gonna get those laughs? So Lauren's like, okay, we'll just have him do it. So then cut to Saturday, my parents happen to be there.
Strutting for fun, strutting my stuff for everyone.
Cut to, we have 2 weeks off. I get a call. It's Lauren's office. Lauren wants to talk to you. I was like, okay. I wait like 30 minutes. I'm kind of like, what's going on? What's going on? And I call, and he's like, you know, so we want to put you in the cast, and, you know, just write anything you think you can score on. You know, I was like, okay. Okay, that's it, bye. There's 3 episodes left, and I was just like, all right. I'm just like hanging up the phone. I was like, thank you for changing my life.
Jason Sudeikis.
So yeah, that's how I ended up in the cast. And it's that same friggin' dancing that people love from What Up With That. It's the same friggin' dancing I did as a 16-year-old kid trying to make my teammates laugh. It's like, you know. So leaving here, I was maybe gonna leave in 2012 when Kristen and Andy left. I wasn't sure, and I wasn't sure that night. And that was really, really hard because when I'm saying goodbye to friends, people that I had, you know, grown up with, you know, at that point, quarter of my life, we were all very close and connected, and especially Kristen and I, having to say goodbye to that friend on live television. It was a lot. And again, not knowing if I was gonna go, but it just, So then, ended up deciding to come back for 2012, 2013. Our group was leaving. You know, I knew Seth was gonna be leaving. Fred was leaving, I knew Bill was leaving, and I knew I was leaving. I just didn't really tell anybody. And I was like, who's gonna be across the table? And I didn't want to be a bad upperclassman, a senior, being like, it was better this, it was better, you know. Cynicism, it's a currency we spend here, but is not one that has a great exchange rate. And I wrote a sketch, kind of a goodbye sketch. I was like, where I play the strip club DJ, and it was always his last night there, and now we're gonna head out.
Tommy's gonna miss the hell out of all you dummies. And if I could do it all over again, I wouldn't change a thing. So long.
And it didn't get picked. It didn't get picked for the final show. So it was just like, son of a bitch. I wish I would have just been a writer the whole time. No. And so, yeah, I left. To get to work here 10 years in the rearview mirror, I feel like I nailed the entry and the exit for me, because I got to learn the place as a writer first and foremost. I was just, you know, trying to keep my head above water and keep up with what I would argue is one of the greatest generations of cast and writers that this show's had. And I just so lucky to get to be at that table. Yeah.
This place changed my life twice. Once as a cast member, as a writer here, but most importantly, as a kid watching from home, you know? And I'll tell you this, if this is your first time watching this show, well, I mean, this one probably won't change your life, you know? But we got a great show for you tonight. Brandi Carlile's here, so stick around, we'll be right back.